Major threats are a unique node that can be found in Void War, specifically in a third sector of every run. They are an optional mini-boss that represents a far harder fight than anything else you will encounter at that point in the game, but also contain massive rewards if you manage to beat them. There are 4 of these mini-bosses that can be encountered, and which one you encounter will depend on the sector you visit. In Technocult sectors, you will face off against the Voltaic Cruiser. For today, we are going to be taking a look at the Voltaic Cruiser, talking about its weapons, the crew, the various systems and gimmicks it has, and strategies to effectively overcome and beat it. So, as said a moment ago, this is the Technocult mini-boss, meaning that it can only be encountered in Technocult sectors. That includes the generic Technocult sectors, but also the Forge Enclave. These are the only 2 spaces that you can encounter the Voltaic in, and other areas will contain different bosses. As with all mini-bosses, the Voltaic Cruiser remains the exact same fight between all Torment levels, with the only notable changes being its total HP. On Torment 0 through 3, it'll have 25 HP. On Torment 4 to 10, it'll have 30 HP. And on Torment 11 and 12, it'll have 40 HP. However, its weapons, their charge rates, the crew on the ships, all of them remain the exact same otherwise. This means that any strategies applied to high-level Torments will also work on low-level Torments. So, as for the Voltaic Cruiser itself, I think the best way to summarize it is this is going to be a fight where it is looking to lock your ship down, disabling your systems, preventing you from repairing stuff, and then killing you with its heavy firepower. As you can see on screen, the Voltaic Cruiser has 3 weapons available to it, each of them getting their own room and system power. The bottom left and bottom right weapon rooms contain the same weapon, the Techno Bombardment. This is a 3-shot burst energy weapon that, if it damages one of your systems, it will cause the Techno Virus effect, the same one that is found on Hex Priest. This disables repairing for 20 seconds. The third weapon room in the Voltaic Cruiser is the Heavy Siege Beam. This is a very slow charging but long beam that will cut across large parts of your ship, dealing significant amounts of damage if it is not blocked. However, that is not everything the Voltaic has, as the boss also has an Energy Surge ability. Every 15 seconds, it will fire 6 ion projectiles that will fly towards your ship, hitting a variety of systems and ionizing them. As with other bosses, there is no way to stop this ability, meaning you simply have to deal with it while you are fighting the cruiser. So those are the weapons of the Voltaic Cruiser. Clearly, they have a game plan of ionizing your shields constantly, and then using those techno bombardments to break your systems and prevent you from repairing them, before letting the heavy siege beam do the lethal amount of damage to actually kill you. However, the cruiser is not all offense, and has a number of systems and a large crew meant to help defend and repair itself while it is trying to kill you. Let's start by talking about what the crew is. So the crew breaks down as the following. There is one assault cyborg that serves as the commander of the ship. There is also another assault cyborg that is running around on the ship. There are 2 servo excavators, which are large, bulky units. There are 2 combat husks, 2 cyber priests with their ability to protect systems, a single hex priest able to also curse your own systems in the same way that techno bombardments do, and then 4 husks. In terms of systems, the Voltaic Cruiser has level 2 shields, a shield charger allowing it to supercharge its shield. It contains a med bay to heal up its crew, and it has level 3 doors as a baseline. Of course, the boss also has your standard systems as well: engines, life support, a command throne, and sensors. However, most of these are fairly standard leveled and don't have anything really notable about them. So with that all said, we now know how the Voltaic cruiser is trying to attack us, and its defensive options. So how are we going to effectively attack this ship? Well, one thing that I think is very important to note is that unlike other mini-bosses and the end-game bosses, the Voltaic cruiser can be crew killed. And this means that if you can just kill all the crew members, the fight will end. And this is going to be, in my opinion, the most consistent way of bringing the Voltaic cruiser down. If we look back at the crew again, really there is only about 4 units we actually need to worry about. The 2 assault cyborgs and the 2 servo excavators, and they are quite dangerous with large health pools and a respectable 4 DPS. However, they are not knights, and the difference between having like 4 and 5 DPS can actually be quite significant, because it means that damage reductions such as from shields or things like drain strength can almost completely neuter these units. And it's also easier to simply have good enough equipped units like your commander and maybe a knight or some other unit you found that can actually just go toe-to-toe and kill those heavier units. Combine that with a lot of very fragile husks that are easy to kill, and you can get a lot of system damage done just through killing those weaker crew, which also weakens the ability of the cruiser to repair itself. Because of this, I would always try to have at least some boarding potential going into the Voltaic cruiser, because being able to get on there and even just disabling one of the weapons or shields can make the fight significantly easier, and it's quite easy to assemble enough power to actually make the crew kill very possible in most runs. A key secret to accomplishing this is going to be using regents. Normally, regents are something you might try to hoard for important fights. Well, this is one of those important fights that you want to be using them on. All of those husks and servos that are weak and low in health are prime pickings for a variety of regents to get a hold of and kill. Often a strategy I like to employ is using pretty much any regent I have to support whatever borders I have and fill up a 2x2 room, usually shields but sometimes one of the weapon rooms, in order to not only maximize the amount of kills that I'm getting but also to cripple those important systems, allowing my other weapons to effectively tackle and disable the Voltaic cruiser. Of course, you can also spam more regents in order to attack multiple rooms at once, but I would generally recommend to prioritize filling up whatever room your borders are going into, because that minimizes the damage they take, and generally they are the ones that are needed in order to actually kill those heavier units from the crew. I would say that generally to successfully board and crew kill the Voltaic cruiser, you need to have your commander alongside one good boarder to go along with them. This can either be a unit that is just souped up with some decent armor and a weapon, or it can be something like a knight, which is generally fantastic to have. Then combine that with usually about, I'd say, 3 or 4 regions in order to bulk the number of boarders up, and that can be enough to generally overcome the cruiser as long as you board early and are able to kill those handful of larger units. However, sometimes you are really struggling for boarding. You don't have a way to get your units onto the enemy ship, or you just really have not found a good combat unit or don't really have any equipment to support them. How do we help to deal with the cruiser in those situations where boarding is really not capable of achieving a crew kill? Well, in that case, we need to keep a focus on what weapons or systems are the most important to disable and have a plan to effectively get access to them and then destroy them. As said a little while ago, the biggest threat from the Voltaic cruiser that we can meaningfully stop are the techno bombardments. These are the weapons that are going to get us killed, because if they're hitting like weapons and disabling our weapons and then preventing them from being repaired for 20 seconds, that can be deadly to the point of just literally losing an entire run to the cruiser. So the end goal of our firepower needs to be hitting those rooms, and we need to aim to at least stop one of them from firing with the other. If we allow both to fire at once because they have the same charge time, that can get very nasty very quickly. However, to do that, we need to first get through shields, and the problem with getting through shields is that the cruiser has a shield charger, which means that going pure armaments is not a very viable strategy because the Voltaic cruiser will just hit that button, usually around the time your first barrage is ready, and it will just get immunity for 15 to 20 seconds. So instead, we need stuff that can go through their shields. Missiles, psyker abilities, lances are all great options in order to get that job going. Or, as I said before, use a couple regions, spam it into one of the weapon rooms, and you'll probably get at least a couple kills off of that. In the end, though, we just need to make sure that we are able to break down those shields and get at least a couple bits of damage onto one of the bombardments to break their time up. We really do not want both to be firing at once. We can also supplement that offensive aim with some defensive stuff, the most notable ones being micro shields and force shields. These two items / abilities are very useful because they allow you to protect crucial systems from the techno bombardments, most notably and generally weapons. Putting a micro shield around your weapons can be very, very useful as insurance if you're having a hard time getting through the Voltaic and need to kind of survive a barrage before you can go in. Once you have started to get some damage on the Voltaic, some other things that can be very useful are ways to prevent repairing. Obviously, if you have something like a Hex Priest yourself, that is extremely powerful and allows you to just completely turn off shields or a crucial weapon for an extended period of time. However, things like breaches or fires are also very effective. Even though many of the units have a resistance to suffocation, they are still going to spend extra time repairing those breaches, giving you more time to get your weapons recharged again and continue to apply damage to those crucial systems. So those are the main game plans. So let me talk about a couple other little things here before we show off a couple example games of what a Voltaic cruiser kill looks like. If you are looking to try to min-max your chances against the Voltaic cruiser, you do have the ability to micro your shields against the Voltaic cruiser's energy burst. If you're looking to be micro-intensive, you can try to depower and repower your shields in order to squeak out a level or two of shields when normally they should be ionized down. This is not always the most reliable thing due to the fact that the ion bursts can just hit the shields room themselves and you can't prevent that otherwise. However, you can do this technically by depowering the systems, allowing the ions to land, and as they are landing, repower shields, and by the time all those ion bursts land, your shields will be back online to at least some extent without being ionized. As I said, though, it's a bit inconsistent, but it can technically be a way for you to save a bit of damage or be able to absorb a bit of those techno bombardments with your shields, actually. Another surefire way to bring down enemy shields is to have some unit that is capable of warding, and then have some unit with a fusion charge. Simply warp into the shields room and use the fusion charge, and you will instantly nuke the shields down to nothing, giving you a free reign to obliterate the Voltaic cruiser. This can be a very powerful way that the boss really can't stop you from doing, so that can be a very useful tip if you don't have a strong boarding crew but still need some way to bring down shields quickly. The final tip I'll give for the Voltaic cruiser is, even if your boarding crew is not particularly strong, you still generally should try to board. Just try to board in a 1x2 room, such as the door system or the sensors. Even if you're not dealing critical damage to crucial systems, just killing off some of those weaker units that the AI will inevitably throw into the fight against your boarders is going to be useful to reduce the repair potential. Every kill matters, and even if you're not going for a crew kill, boarding can still be useful even with just 1 or 2 guys. It still has a purpose, and you should never ignore it when going into a Voltaic fight. So, let's say you overcome the Voltaic cruiser. What do you get as a reward? Well, as with all of the mini bosses, you get a flat scrap reward. Often it is above average for what you get in Sector 3. For Torment 12, usually that's going to be about 40 to 60-ish scrap, depending on the exact RNG roll. It'll be much higher on lower levels, but this is a very welcome amount of scrap that is very much a good reward in itself. However, after that, we also have a pool of options that we will be able to choose from as a secondary reward. The categories are going to be broken down as such. You will receive one of 3 potential weapons, an auto disruptor, an ion lance, or a macro disruptor. You will receive one of 3 potential crew members, an assault cyborg, a cyber priest, or a hex priest. And you will receive one of the following options for equipment: 2 to 3 chrono fields, 2 to 3 electro batons, and 2 to 3 tactical exoskeletons. Now, some of these rewards are kind of crappy. For example, the equipment is usually on the weaker side, as these options are kind of they're not bad, but compared to some of the other stuff you can get, they are quite weak. Generally, the 2 things you want to keep a big eye out for is the heavy ion lance or the assault cyborg. Both of these are some of the best things you can find in the game, and being able to get them for free is a massive value. The assault cyborg, for example, is 120 scrap. It is an innate border, and it is a bulky crew member with resistances. It is a extremely good unit, and you can get that alongside a scrap reward, resulting in often 200 plus scrap easily for killing the cruiser. But with that all said, let's go ahead and now watch a couple of my kills against the Voltaic cruiser, and I'll commentate over them, talking about why I'm doing things, how I'm tackling the boss, and all of that. So in this first clip that I'm going to be showing you off, this is going to be me kind of stomping the Voltaic cruiser with a really strong boarding party. I have a War Knight, a Conqueror, and my Exile, all with plentiful and powerful items, and they're going to kind of just bully the weaker crew. It is why I believe that the Voltaic is best killed through crew kills, because as you see, this is going to go very quickly. I board into shields in order to make sure that if I'm not able to crew kill for some reason, I'm at least killing those husks and whatnot in the shields, and now I can use my weapons to actually damage the various techno bombardments, which are, again, the big weapon threat. Of course, I do have a heavy ion lance, which could have helped me, but otherwise my offense is really this boarding party, and we're already pretty much at the end of the fight. I've barely done any damage to the ship, but their crew is dead. A strong boarding party just kind of walks over them, and that's pretty much it. That's the entire fight. This second fight we're going to go into is another one where I'm going to crew kill the Voltaic. However, I don't have nearly as strong of a boarding crew as I did in the last fight. So I'm going to actually make some different decisions here. Notably, I only have a 1 chance of boarding through 1 dark matter prism, and my only real boarding party is a single Blood Knight and my commander. However, I have, in preparation for this fight, actually purchased a couple regions, and I'm going to use those so I can board 4 people into the ships. Now, I choose to actually board into weapons in this clip because I realize that my ability to really deal a lot of damage with my weapons is not really there. I have a thunder cannon and I have the Reaper beam, but otherwise my offensive potential to actually destroy the techno bombardments are not really there. So I'm focusing very much on just crippling one of them to minimize damage, and then I trust that I can generally take the fight, as I have rejuvenate and healing and all that, and I do have technically some boarding with Chaos Rift if I need a backup to go back in. However, as you see, I'm pretty much just kind of clearing this up. Even just 2 crew members and a couple regions are enough to generally overwhelm the Voltaic's crew. And I do have that antimatter bomb to nuke shields if the fight were going longer. Missiles are generally good in this way, but we're pretty much at the end of this fight where, you know, essentially I'm just going to have to wait to kill off maybe a handful of these smaller units, that husk that's running away and going to repair stuff. I'm going to have to break through the doors and get to them. But that's pretty much the fight. And as you see, you know, boarding is just so effective against the Voltaic. I took very, very little damage. And even though that heavy siege beam is about to go off, you know, the fight's already over and it wasn't able to actually do that much against me. This final clip I'm going to show you is, I think, a good example of how to play this fight, even if you don't have a lot of boarding. In this run, I really had not been finding much of any boarding. I had the starting assault cyborg from my ship, but I don't have a way to get my commander on the enemy ship. I don't have any other units that can board with the assault cyborg. I don't even have really great summons. The only ones are the Doom Regents, which are fine, but they're not exactly going to kill the enemy crew. So I'm putting them on my ship and summoning them to harass a little bit, but I'm going to have to take this fight the long way. I do have some good options in order to sort of get through their weapons, utilizing a heavy ion sphere to instantly bring down their shields, but missiles or a variety of other things could have also accomplished this. But as you see, I'm going to be utilizing that assault cyborg, pulling him in and out of fights, trying to just snipe off some of the weaker crew members, because killing a couple husks just reduces their repairability. As you see, I'm continuing to put my efforts and focus on essentially just killing the techno bombardments. Those are, again, as I keep repeating, the core danger of this fight. Of course, now that I have one of them broken and a technovirus on it, they can't really repair it, so I'm able to put a little more effort on the heavy siege beam as well to further limit the damage. But if I have to pick between one or the other, my focus fire is largely going to come down on making sure shields remain broken, and then also dealing with the bombardments. Now here I get a bit unlucky because shields come back on and the AI slams the shield generator. So they just completely blanked my pretty much main bombardment, which would have made this fight go a lot quicker. So now I'm going to have to continue to kind of brawl it out here. I decide that I need to land the second heavy ion lance, and so I'm bored into the command throne and use my assault cyborg versus the enemy assault cyborg. I do have some med kits equipped so I can heal off of this, but it's still, I'm in a bit of a tough spot, and if this heavy ion lance had missed, it could have gone quite bad. Thankfully it doesn't, so I'm able to get the bombardment off, break one of them, and now I'm in a decent position as long as I don't let the shields get repaired for a third time, which I'm going to work very hard to prevent. But overall, you know, the little summons are going in, but, you know, as you see, this fight is really taking its time. I'm having to slowly chip down this very large health pool the cruiser has. But I just need to continually make sure I'm breaking weapons, killing off what I can, you know, and just overall, like, trying to pamper and annoy them. Now, here, I do make a bit of a mistake by allowing the shields to be repaired and then ignoring them, which means that now I'm going to have to fight it out even longer, because I have to wait for the charger to go down, and then I need to break through with double storm. Which is not ideal. However, if you notice, the enemy crew is also starting to run out of health, at least some of the weaker crew members. So that's going to give me the opportunity to snipe a little bit if I continue to utilize the assault cyborg in sort of hit and runs. But essentially, we are just kind of plugging along as standard here. You know, just trying to make sure I can, as effectively as possible, get some kills off. Try to get a little bit of damage. You know, I get a little bit of damage on one of the bombardments through a snipe with one of my summons. You know, and we're pretty much just plugging along here, continuing to just hammer away at them. But now I'm in a pretty good spot. Shields are down. They are technovirus, so they can't even get repaired. That's going to give me more than enough time to essentially just, you know, blow up their weapons and land this final kill. But as you can see, it is also possible to gun down the Voltaic cruiser, and I think this is a good example of how to do it. Just get shields down, do what you can with boarding or summons, and then go ahead and just continue to focus on those two key weapon systems and bring them down. And with all that said, we are at the end of this guide. If you find stuff like this useful, make sure to like and subscribe, as eventually I will get around to doing all of the mini bosses and then moving on to the 3 final bosses. But hopefully this gives you a decent way, and you can feel more confident about going into Voltaic fights, because I do generally consider the Voltaic to be the easiest of the mini-bosses to kill, and the rewards are really, really good. It's overall a really good fight, and it can help you get through things like higher torments easier, because that extra injection of scrap and a good reward can set you up for a very successful run. If you've watched all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much, and I hope you have a good day.